Hey, Brian, this is Dan and Taylor and Josh at You Watch, I Listen. How are you?
Hey, how you doing, guys?
I'm doing great.
How's
and
everything?
On the line, we have two-time Bram Stoker award-winning author Brian Keene. And Brian, I got to tell you right off the bat, this is Dan. This is really cool for me. I've been a fan of yours for a long, long time now. Actually, I got The Rising from a friend. He gave me one book to read by an author named J.L. Bourne. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
very much.
I read Day by Day Armageddon, and once I finished that, he said you need to read The Rising and The City of the Dead, because while I'm a big horror fan, the zombie genre is by far my favorite. And I bought The Rising and The City of the Dead one day. I bought them at Borders, and I finished The Rising in one day. And I started falling asleep right towards the end of The Rising. And as I'm falling asleep, I started having a nightmare. And I wake up out of it, and I see my reading lamp like above my head, but the silhouette looked like a person, and I just swung an overhand punch and shattered it because it scared the hell out of me.
That's awesome.
And then from there I read I read Dead Sea, I read Conqueror Worm, Dark Hollow. So you've written a lot of work that has really made a big impact on my life.
Well, thanks, man. That's awesome.
And a couple things. I actually just reread The Rising and the City of the Dead before we did this call. I read them this week again, and there was a lot of things that I picked up on because you had somewhat of a relationship with George Romero. You wrote a really touching tribute to him after he passed, which I read over. I noticed you put a lot of little Easter eggs to the Romero Dead films in your books. Is that fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Consciously, I did it on purpose. That's nothing new.
Of course.
In the genre. Growing up, I'd see, Stephen King, Skip Inspector, people like that do the same thing.
For sure.
It was my turn. You pay tribute to those who inspired you. So, yeah, George, of course, Ken Faree, who played Peter in Dawn of the Dead, who is now a dear friend. You put him in there. I put a little cameo nod to Tom Savini.
Yep. The one that
a lot of stuff.
The one that I caught in City of the Dead, and it's when they're escaping through the sewer, and the alligator that was in the sewer, and he jumps in head first, and he says "choke on it," which is a Day of the Dead reference with Rhodes.
Well, and you know why I did with the alligator?
Why?
It is Day of the Dead.
The opening scene.
Probably more than anything.
Oh yeah, well you got the underground base where you first meet Ob.
Well, no, not so much that, but it's Day of the Dead that really gave me the idea.
Just the end of days kind of thing.
Yeah, because at the opening shot, there's that alligator.
Yeah, that's and then the Dead Walk is the famous newspaper clip that pops up.
Right, and I thought, watching as a teenager, I thought, oh, that alligator is going to be a zombie. That's so cool. And then it wasn't.
It's just an alligator.
And years later, when I'm casting around for ideas for my first novel, it's like, oh, the alligator from Dawn of the Dead. What if that had been a zombie? Okay, I got my idea.
Well, yeah, there was definitely, I picked up on the Day of the Dead homage the most for sure, based on, even things like the military convoys that the guy Shaw was kind of like Rhodes, where it just became like a ruthless militia that was dictating everything. But you put some really, the biggest thing I could say about these novels specifically is that you handled the characters with so much heart that the horror almost became secondary at times. And we're in New Jersey, and I always remember when reading the book when you're driving up past West Orange and you see the cemetery on both sides of the highway, and you reference that. We drive by that all the time. And so to me that was like, that stuck out big time. And
that was all personal stuff. I was a divorced dad at the time. I was a young man, but I had a kid very young. But his mom and him lived in Belleville, New Jersey.
Okay,
and, I would make that drive, every other week.
And you see that cemetery, and it's like you get ideas in your head.
Well, and I mean, the route that Jim and Martin travel in that book is pretty much the drive I made to go see my kid.
Yeah,
right.
Well, that's especially because I work in that area. I work more around Clifton, Patterson, Passaic area, but we have a lot of customers in Belleville towards that way. I guess because driving that so many times, I think nothing of it. But now referencing it in the book,
if you have someone that's driving up for the first few times and they see just thousands and thousands of gravestones on both sides of them. And it's pretty creepy. Right. But you handled those characters like you said. You were a divorced father, and the Jim and Danny saga was really cool to just see that father trying to go through hell and high water to get to his son. And you introduced these really unique, complex characters like Martin, like Frankie. Frankie especially, who that was a bold risk to take. It's a recovering heroin addict prostitute who becomes almost the hero, pretty much the hero. She's got a badass scene when they first get to Danny where she's just ripping through zombies, falls into a pool. That was a really ambitious character in this genre.
Oh yeah, and it's weird. You go back. I mean, now here we are in 2019, and social issues of representation. They're what everyone is talking.
Yeah, and
I wrote this back in 99, 2000.
Yeah,
and it wasn't on anyone's mind back then.
No.
But I kept thinking, well, I know who's reading my books, and it's not just it's not just folks that look like me. I want to make sure everybody's in the book. And it's so weird in the zeitgeist at the same exact time. You've got Danny Boyle.
Yeah,
right.
28 days later.
And you got Kirkman working on Walking Dead, and they all came out within a couple months of each other. And if you look at them, every one of them has a strong woman of color. Every one of them has a parent and child dynamic.
That's a really good point. And
so I guess it was something in the zeitgeist, maybe.
And even in Dead Sea, you took your main character was a gay black man, right. and that's that again. When I read that, I was like, wow, this is different for what I'm used to. You took characters that people usually would more often than not try to avoid. Maybe not so much in horror, because going back to horror, you look at the way they've done things, going back to Ellen Ripley and like Alien, for example, and you look at the sci-fi genre, Sarah Connor. You mentioned the thing about like social issues, and I see a lot of horror writers and directors often reference that sometimes the best content comes out when there is political turmoil, social turmoil in the country. For you, would you find that to be true?
I do. I think back to when I was getting my start. We had a lot of turmoil at that time when I was just starting to write. We had the L.A. riots, Rodney King,
OJ,
the aftermath of McVeigh, and all that.
Yeah,
and
McVeigh.
That was my whole generation, Joe Hill, Jonathan Mayberry, J.F. Gonzalez, Mary San Giovanni, myself, we all sort of started right around that time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I think there's a lot to that idea.
There has to be a major correlation, because you look over the last couple of years in film. I mean, every year people always like saying horror goes into bad phases, but every year there's good horror. But lately it seems like in film and TV, the quality is almost matching the quantity in a lot of cases of the stuff that's coming out. From I actually mentioned this to you on Twitter when the show came out, but I've been waiting to see if they ever did an adaptation, a film or TV adaptation of The Rising and City of the Dead.
They should.
And my first pick to direct after I watched the series was Mike Flanagan to direct the series of that potentially, because the weaving storylines and how they all come together. And Mike Flanagan, from not just The Haunting of Hill House, but he did a film a couple years ago called Oculus that tied in these multiple storylines so beautifully that it felt almost like Christopher Nolan does very well. Right. Yeah. And that would be the guy to me. Like and I don't think they can ever make just a movie of the Rising and City of the Dead, because there's so much going on.
They've tried.
Yeah, I remember reading years ago that they were trying to.
It's been tried many times. I quit talking about it eventually, because every time I'd mention it was under option, people not really knowing how the business works, they thought that meant, it's automatically going to get made.
No.
I mean, the closest we ever got, they had talked to Robert Downey Jr., I'm told, at one point.
Okay.
About playing Jim.
That would have been a good. I always pictured him and Bruce Willis actually playing Jim.
Yeah, and he. I'm told, I never spoke to him, but I'm told he was interested, but the people who had it at that time couldn't get it off the ground, and he went on to take the role of Tony Stark.
And that's kind of, you can't turn that down if you're him. Look how it's worked out. And I mean, it would be really cool to see it eventually. I mean, you've had one thing that became a YouTube short, which was the Fast Zombies Suck.
Which is I mean, I've Ghoul got adapted, and Fast Zombies Suck. There's actually quite a bit of movement on Urban Gothic right now.
Oh, really?
We've got a screenwriter attached, a director who I can't name, but he's one of the hottest directors in horror right now.
Okay.
Very interested once the screenplay's finished. So it looks like that'll happen.
Well, it's cool to see also that the Stephen King adaptations are getting new life as well.
Oh, for sure.
And maybe even possible. They did a very good job with the new It. The new Pet Sematary looks interesting with the twist on it. So it is cool just to see there are these new hot directors in horror, from Ari Aster, who did Hereditary, and now Midsommar that's coming out. There's a lot of really good names in horror that are coming around. So what are your thoughts on because the zombie genre, it's always kind of gone through lulls, from Romero's Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and then you had things like Zombie 2 to Return of the Living Dead, and then when The Walking Dead really, Danny Boyle might have kickstarted again in film, and then Zack Snyder remade Dawn of the Dead, which I'm indifferent to, but then The Walking Dead kind of brought the whole zombie genre back into the forefront. Do you consider yourself a fan of The Walking Dead and how zombies are just regular part of culture now?
I mean, the eye-opener for me was a couple years after The Rising and City of the Dead were out. I hadn't written the other two books in the Rising series yet. And now, of course, I'm writing the fifth. But the first two books had been out for a couple years, and I was in a Hot Topics store.
Okay.
And I saw a bunch of T-shirts, and the first T-shirt had zombie goldfish, and the second one had zombie squirrel.
Okay.
And if you've read the book, that's my shit.
Yeah, exactly. Where everything becomes something. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not getting a dime for it, but okay, I have directly influenced pop culture, so that's cool.
Yeah,
that is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I as far as the stuff now, because I am working on the fifth and final book in the Rising series, I'm trying to avoid other zombie stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and there, like you said, there is a lot of it.
Yeah, and it's just it's a case of I don't want to accidentally be influenced by someone else, but I pay attention to what's going on, certainly.
Right.
For my own podcast, I kind of have to. I got to be up on the news.
Absolutely,
and what's
yeah, sure,
yeah, absolutely. Listen,
I'm on record and. I'm dear friends. Well, friends with Greg Nicotero, and I mean no disrespect to him or anybody else on the cast and crew who I know, but I'm not a fan of the Walking Dead television show.
Sure, and
they lost me after Herschel's Farm. What was that, season 3?
Season 2. After they leave, after Shane Rick kills Shane is season 2. Yeah,
I mean it was basically a season of Farmville with zombies.
Yeah, farming with Rick.
I mean, you're not wrong. I mean, The Walking Dead. This is Taylor. You watch, I listen. By the way. No, but The Walking Dead lost me after Terminus, which is actually the next season.
That was season 3 or 4?
That was season
4. Season 3 was the prison. Season 4 was Terminus.
That's where they lost me. But I just want to say wholeheartedly, because I'm not really a fan of horror.
No, Taylor scares very easily.
And listen, it also helps that double down. I'm not really that big fan of reading, and
he just can't read very well.
But I remember like when Dan and I first became friends a little around 8 years ago. We were drunk hanging out, and he hands me your book, The Rising. He goes, dude, just read this thing, you'll love it.
I was like, it'll get in your head, and it's cerebral.
And that's I want to continue the series. I just haven't had any time. I mean, it's been 8 years. I think I've had plenty.
Yeah,
of time.
You've had time.
I've just been procrastinating. It's an amazing book, and I'm very happy.
I remember.
Love it, dude.
So he just told you I recommended it to him, and my oldest brother, who's a guy that really doesn't scare at all. I'm like, you need to read these, and he read them, and he wanted me to tell you he had this dream after reading it that because you didn't just you took the zombie genre and you put this spin on it where it's almost a little like Evil Dead inspired too.
It's exactly like Evil Dead.
Exactly, and the other one I thought of was in Return of the Living Dead when they have the one zombie strapped down on the gurney and they talk to it, and she's like, it hurts to be dead. The eating makes them feel better. Those are the two things I reference. My brother had a dream where he's like digging a grave, and then because he thought his wife died when all this was going on, and then my sister walks up with his wife's head and throws it to him while he's in the grave. And he's like, he remembers that dream so vividly because, and this the one thing I always reference to people when I'm talking about the book, that the idea of these zombies referencing the memories in the head was the neighbor, Mr. De Santos, and his wife coming back and using the code in the panic room, and to think they're not just these mindless corpses that just kind of just try to break through things, that they can use strategy. If they were a pilot, they can fly, things like that.
I saw a lot more of that in the third book, The Rising, selected scenes from the yes. Yeah, there's a lot of material in there where the zombies are using the abilities of their hosts. Like if the host was a samurai warrior, now you've got a zombie who knows how to be a samurai.
Oh, Jesus. Swinging around a katana.
That was the thing. And the character Ob was so interesting, being like the leader, like to actually think that the zombies can assimilate into like an army. And was there anything that directly inspired Ob, like a leader of this army?
I didn't think so at the time, but I have to admit, going back now, as a kid, there was this comic book I read called Dead World, and I didn't have access to a lot of comics, so I only read like 2 or 3 issues of it, and I'd kind of just completely forgotten about it. But they had a talking zombie in there who was kind of a leader, so I guess maybe that was a bit of a subconscious influence.
Okay.
But really, what I would say more than anything, it was Stephen King's Randall Flagg, The Walking Dead.
Yeah, that's wow. I haven't thought of that in years. Wow.
Yeah, and by design, Ob he's an entity that has appeared in other stuff by me, not related to The Rising.
It's kind of like that Stephen King world where things can be referenced in other novels.
Exactly.
And so one of the other characters that I got to ask, the tower that they went to in the city, Mr. Ramsey, is that supposed to be Donald Trump?
Oh, yes.
Yes, I knew it. Yeah. Because
it's great. You mentioned George earlier.
Yeah.
The first time I met him, I had just finished writing City of the Dead. It hadn't been published, but I'd finished writing it. And Greg Nicotero, he asked me, we're at this party. And he asked me, he says, you want to meet George? And I'm like, oh, hell yeah. And walk over to him. He had a copy of The Rising. And he asked me to sign it for him, and I did. And we get to talking about what we're working on. And he had just finished Land of the Dead, I guess. And he's telling me about it. He's like, yeah, there's this, this industrialist megalomaniac, and he's got this impregnable skyscraper, and the zombies are camped outside. How about you? What are you working on?
Well,
sounds like a hell of a guy.
Yeah, this sequel to The Rising. There's this industrialist billionaire.
And I mean, it's crazy because when I read this was before the idea of Donald Trump even being president was a thing, and I remember reading like, oh, that's supposed to be Donald Trump. He's in the giant tower, and he wants to save everyone, and thinks he's doing the right thing, and you were kind of ahead of the game on that one.
These stories are as old as the human race. There's always going to be people like that,
Sure.
So I was going to say, Brian, now I just wanted to ask, because I guess you've been a writer for quite some time now. Was there any particular time before, like, in your childhood, or like where you wanted to actually become a writer, or was there like a particular instance where like you found it later in life, or like, oh, I'm pretty good at this, maybe I should pursue it? You know what I mean?
I knew when I was 8 years old.
That's awesome. Wow.
My dad took me. My dad, he was a Vietnam vet. He was a blue collar guy, very into like football and stuff.
My kind of guy.
A man's man kind of guy.
I mean, I think he read one book in his life.
You sound like Taylor.
Sound like me, yeah.
He was Taylor.
I'm Brian Keene's dad.
He's probably cooler than Taylor is.
Everyone's cooler.
He took me to the newsstand one day, and he wanted to get himself a hunting magazine and a package of chewing tobacco, and he took me along. And usually he'd buy me, like bubblegum cards or something. But I saw these comic books, and I'm like, Dad, can I get a couple of these? And he's like, yeah. So I get 2 of them, and I bring them home. An issue of Captain America, written and drawn by Jack Kirby,
right,
and an issue of The Defenders, written by Steve Gerber.
Okay.
And that issue of The Defenders, I read it, and then I reread it, and then it was time for dinner. After dinner, I went back and reread it a third time and got out the dictionary and started looking up the words I didn't know.
Okay, that's
pretty
cool.
And I noticed I noticed this little credit box on the bottom of the first page. It said written by Steve Gerber, and it clicked in my head. I'm like, oh, this is like an actual job you can have.
A moment of realization.
You became self-aware.
There was an awakening in you.
Yeah, I mean, that was it. I mean, in middle school and junior high school, I had a couple friends who were also reading Stephen King books, but I was the guy reading the afterwords and the introductions to Steve's books where he would talk about how he wrote the stories.
Okay, yeah.
Already I was like trying to learn. We didn't have the internet.
You were diving into the special features of the book before they had it on DVD.
The early 90s, I got out of the Navy and I wanted to do this, but I had no idea how. And Joe Lansdale, very early in his career, he was doing a signing at the local comic book store. And, I went in, and he was one of the first people to give me some advice. And then I met a semi-local author, Nancy Springer. She was writing fantasy. She gave me some really good advice. But before the internet, you kind of had to figure this stuff out.
Pencil and paper, pretty much, or a typewriter.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I bet you Taylor's never used a typewriter in his life.
No, I have. I very much have.
That's pretty great. So let me ask you, because we talked about fast zombies suck. Do you truly hate the sprinting zombies that became?
No, that was all a playful jab at George.
Yeah, because he definitely did not like them.
Yeah, he gave me shit. I mean, he was good-natured about it, but he gave me a lot of crap about the fast zombies.
Yeah,
because in fact, the second convention he and I were ever at, he knew I was going to be there, and he had these T-shirts printed up that said "Fast Zombies Suck," and he was selling it from his table, and he kept telling people, "Oh yeah, go over and say hi to Brian in your T-shirt."
Because in your book, you mentioned they run, but it also depended on the state of the decay they were in, which to me makes the most sense. Because when I look at Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead, which for me, I think the opening scene of that movie is truly horrific, and then I think once it gets into the mall, it gets a little hokey. And again, they show them the zombies decaying, but they're still running a 4.340. Like it doesn't make much sense. But in your book, it made sense. And then 28 days later, they're infected. It's almost like rabies in humans. It's not truly like the undead kind of thing. And again, you took such a cerebral approach to play. Almost these zombies could play mind games rather than to me, the slower ones always creep me out more.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't hear them coming. There's this great recent indie horror zombie film called, I think I let Josh watch it, called The Dead. That they were.
Oh, yes.
I love The Dead because it just reminded me of the things that when I was younger in like Night of the Living Dead that scared me. How you can't even hear them coming because it's just these slow just shambling things right to you.
Well, it's a very interesting take on this, like very much the zombies. So that's like a really like I wouldn't say out of left field, but it's a very interesting take on it because it gives it another dynamic as opposed to just like they're coming. You
mentioned the zombie goldfish, the idea of this guy, his dog gets hit by a car and then the dog's dead and then it bites him and its guts are hanging out and it's still coming back. The thought, and then it's even trying to speak. There's this great scene where Frankie's in the zoo and there's a zombie lion and it's never spoken before, so it's trying to speak. You took such an interesting take on it.
Yeah.
And so you said that a lot of that came from the idea of the Evil Dead films, correct?
A lot of it was Evil Dead, and like I said, the whole animal idea, it all goes back to that
alligator
throwaway scene with the alligator.
It just was a thought that sprung into your head, and my love for the zombie genre came from my dad always let me sneak and watch horror movies. He had an awesome collection of these, and there was one that he would never let me watch, and probably understandably so, like age 6. He had this really cool VHS, there was a million editions of Night of the Living Dead because of the copyright problem, and he wouldn't let me watch that, and then one night my mom went out and he's like, all right, we'll watch Night of the Living Dead, and thankfully for me he fell asleep 5 minutes in, so I'm up by myself watching it, and at 6-7 years old I'd never seen anything like that. Like that scared me more than like Psycho did, Nightmare on Elm Street. For some reason this one just stuck with me, and when they just did the re-release of Night of the Living Dead a few months ago, we went to the IMAX screening of it in 4K, and you were part of the Night of the Living Dead anthology book that just came out. You got the right. What was that had to be, you said you met George a bunch of times, you had somewhat of a relationship. That had to be really cool to be part of something that is so ingrained in American DNA and cinema specifically, to write a book. So what was that like for you?
Oh, I mean, it was an absolute honor. Because I mean, not only to be invited, but I mean, because I've done a lot of stuff like that. Aliens, Doctor Who, The X-Files, but this is one that's really friggin' personal, not only to me, but to every other peer I have in this industry and every fan that I know. I mean, we all go back.
That's a Mount Rushmore horror film, Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah, so to contribute something in canon to that universe, it's great.
And yours, and of all the stories in there, yours stood out the most because, again, you write your characters and the little details with so much heart. Like, they almost become part of your. It almost seems like you're writing them as part of your family. Well, they're all handled. Even the small backup characters, like Bates in City of the Dead, had so much heart, like little touches to them. And so you have a very good pulse for the characters that you're trying to convey to print.
Well, I was going to say, they're much character pieces too. You know what I mean? It's great.
Well, I've always felt horror, I mean, as a genre, it really only works if you have empathy for the characters.
Absolutely.
Now, you don't necessarily have to like the characters.
You got to feel for them.
Empathy. Yeah, so I always focus on characters. Scares naturally.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, just listen to you speak about it and how much of appreciation you have for the genre in total, like. I could tell just from reading the one book, The Rising, like you're fan, like you're as much a fan as you are in it. You know what I mean? And and that very much translates into your work, and I could see that.
And that's cool,
and your passion for
because
it.
To see,
that's amazing.
With so much there's so much quantity of zombie stuff, and you could tell some of them it's just like, oh, this is a killer payday. Like when I watched when I saw World War Z, the movie. The only thing in common with the book is the title.
I mean, it was cool.
It was a good action flick, but it did not have it was nothing resembling the book at all. And I guarantee, I'm pretty sure that, I don't want to say guarantee, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's got to be a fear of any of your adaptations, is that they just take the name and then turn it into something else entirely.
Well, I mean, it can very much happen. Yeah. Ghoul, my fan base seems to be split 50-50. Some people like the adaptation. The other ones did not like how it veered away from the book.
Usually how it goes with adaptations.
What angers me is when they get mad at me for it. I'm like, man, I got no control over that.
Right. Yeah, like what am I supposed to do? Like, it's just... You don't want
I've written 50 horror novels, but I'm still a blue collar guy living in rural Pennsylvania. I'm not a millionaire off this.
I was gonna say, like, a lot of people think like when writers, like, they have their adaptations like brought to screen, they all think they're gonna be executive producers. Like, not everyone's George R.R. Martin that's on set.
Yeah,
or, like, taking part in the writing process.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Exactly. It's very rare. I mean, that's why, like, with the new Stephen King adaptations, you can tell even if they're changed. Like in It, they had to change certain things from the book, but it kept the spirit of the novel, which is often lost, and that's what World War Z did not keep, the spirit of the novel.
Right.
And while I was surprised that I did enjoy the movie, it could have been so much better, but that's a book that probably works better as a mini-series because there's so much happening in it.
Right.
And so you said you've written 50 novels. Do you have one that you consider your best or your favorite that you wrote?
I've got 3.
Okay, what are they?
Dark Hollow.
Yes, very good one.
I think Dark Hollow's... I mean, if you that and a novella called The Girl in the Glider, they would be my number 1 and my number 2. And I think both of those, if you really want to know who I am, they're probably my most autobiographical works. They're my most personal works. They're ones that I would not mind seeing in print 100 years from now after I'm gone.
Sure.
And then actually a more recent novel, The Complex.
The Complex, okay.
Which was,
I'm going to pick that one up.
That was... my best friend, author J.F. Gonzalez, had passed, and I was working through a lot of that. And people had kind of been saying, oh, Brian Keene's getting older. His stuff's not as hardcore as it used to be.
It's got to be tough to hear.
And I said, let's show you kids I still got it.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Those two factors came together into The Complex. I think personally, it's probably the most fun I've ever had writing.
I'm gonna pick that one up.
I say, because you sent it like during The Complex. Was that like when you wrote that? Do you have like a chip on your shoulder, like you had something to prove? Is that like that's kind of what it sounds like? Not
so much something to prove. Just I'd had it. I just had it with everyone
Right.
and everything.
You're like, here, you want this? Here you go.
Yeah, I had just gotten divorced for the second time, and I was living in this apartment complex, and it was embarrassing because I go to anywhere else in the world, people don't know who I am, but in rural Pennsylvania, oh yeah, that's our version of Stephen King. Everybody.
Yeah,
knows.
I can imagine.
So
That's cool.
It's embarrassing. They're like, oh, you got 50 books. What are you doing living here?
Yeah, well, it's like maybe I like it here. How about that?
I'm mad. I'm in this apartment, and my best friend has just died, and
it's therapeutic.
These people on the internet saying, "Oh yeah, he's lost it. He doesn't have it anymore." And I locked myself away for 3 months. And bang that novel out.
I can imagine with the way the internet and social media is that criticism's got to be very, very difficult because some of it is just unwarranted and hateful.
For the sake of being hateful, too.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, I ignore it. I never read my reviews anymore. I'm not above, retweeting a review if it's good.
Sure,
because,
of course.
To be honest, I want to sell books.
Absolutely.
But,
you're as much as
business.
as much as you love what you're doing, you got to be a performer as well.
Yeah, yeah. But I don't read. I don't take them to heart. But at that particular moment in life, I was taking everything to heart.
Absolutely. So you said that you're working on the final book in the Rising series. What's the title, and when should it be dropping?
The title is The Fall. I had started it before my accident last year. For your listeners that don't know, I ended up lighting myself on fire last summer.
And it wasn't by choice. So that's
no, it wasn't by choice. And that was a long recovery process. In truth,
you had second and third degree burns to the face and arm, body, I believe.
Flash and first degree on my face. Second and third on my arm. My elbow was down to the elbow.
And the fans really rallied with the GoFundMe in that case as well, did they not?
Yeah, I mean, people think, they think, he's been writing for 20 years.
Yeah, not everyone's Stephen King, buddy.
Yeah, right.
Well, it's not only that, I don't have health insurance.
Yeah,
you can't get it when you're a middle-aged person who's been self-employed for 20 years.
Yeah, no.
not even the Affordable Care Act will cover it.
Correct.
So, I had no choice but to do that GoFundMe.
Yeah.
But long story short, that put me behind on everything. But I am working on it. It's probably going to be the longest novel I've ever done.
Okay.
It starts around midway through The Rising, the first novel, and it ends about 3 months after City of the Dead.
Okay.
There are some characters from the first 2 books. I'm not going to say who.
Okay, cool.
And there are a bunch of new characters, and we finally get to see more of these 2 hosts of demons that followed,
Yeah, the trees and the bugs and
exactly.
That's awesome. I'm very excited for that. So before we wrap up, we do because we're a podcast that's based in movies and music, and we always ask our guests a couple of questions. So the first one is, what is your favorite album or artist and album?
Yeah.
Oh man, can I do top 3?
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Prince, Purple Rain.
Great choice.
Yes.
We're all shaking our heads here like hell yeah.
Queensryche's Operation Mindcrime.
Okay, good one.
And Faith No More's Angel Dust.
Oh, that's a really good. Wow, you just shocked us. That was
you seriously just dropped 3
in
a row. Wasn't expecting any of those
gems right there.
Hell yeah!
All right, and the next one is maybe I have 2. It's a loaded question. So the first one is just your favorite movie.
Carpenter's The Thing, without a doubt.
Hell yeah, one of the all-time greats. And now I got to do one for my own fan service here. Your favorite zombie movie?
There you go.
Ooh, that's great. I will always have a nostalgic love for Romero's Dawn of the Dead.
Hell yeah.
But of the more recent stuff, I really got a kick out of Train to Busan.
Train to Busan was awesome. And there's one that's on Netflix and Amazon Prime right now. I don't know if you saw this, but it's called The Night Eats the World, I believe.
I've seen it, but I haven't watched it yet.
The thing that I appreciate about this, and I think you will as well, and I definitely think you should check it out, is that it really focuses in on the isolation that one has in these events and what they do to pass time and get by and how you can go kind of stir crazy. It was a very intimate setting for being like a low-budget horror film. That one, I was very surprised at how much I enjoyed it. So I would definitely recommend checking that one out. So is there anything else you want to plug or promote and where people can find you?
I got a new novel in stores right now. It's called Hole in the World. If you're a fan of Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None.
Okay.
It's And Then There Were None with dinosaurs and killer robots.
I'm signed up with you. Put one of those things and I'm in. You put both of them in a book or a movie, I'm in.
And yeah, you can find me at briankeene.com.
Well, Brian, I got to tell you again, it was a tremendous honor for me. I was always hoping to catch you at one of the conventions in Jersey at some point. So just even getting to speak with you as such a longtime fan is a tremendous, tremendous honor for me.
Well, absolutely, guys. And listen, if you ever want to make the drive 3 hours south to Pennsylvania, we'll have you on my podcast. We'll do a crossover episode.
Dude, that would be fantastic. Yes. I mean, we're in North Jersey. We're in Passaic. I'm in West Melford, Pompton. So I got family that lives right in Carbondale, Pennsylvania. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, that would be. Dude, you have no idea how much of a thrill that would be for me. So we should definitely set something like that up over the spring and summertime.
Yeah, dude.
All right, sounds good.
All right, Brian, thanks so much, man. You have a great day, all right?
All right, guys. And Tyler?
Yeah, Taylor.
Taylor.
Listen, it's been happening my whole life, but it doesn't help that my best friend in the world is named Tyler, so it's fine.
Go ahead, Brian.
Taylor.
Yeah.
Read a book this week, okay?
Yeah.
I will. I'm not even joking because
give him 2 weeks. He's a slow reader.
No, I really want to like catch up with the Rising series.
I'll let you borrow him.
Yeah, please. I want it.
All right, Brian. Thanks again so much, man.
Thank you so much, sir.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye.
Later. All right, and that was Brian Keene, man. That was
called me Tyler.
Yeah, and we just got invited to be on his podcast, which is
that was so cool, dude.
That was for me, man. I'm like giddy right now.
I know you are,
and
you should be.
That was cool.
I got a man's ass to whip, and I got alcohol to drink.